We are on the third day of the lunch break of the third day of questioning of the undercover police officer Robert Hastings, who, using the cover name Rob Harrison, infiltrated No Borders Network, State of Emergency Collective, International Solidarity Movement, Disarmed Dicey, Rampart Social Centre, was subjected a woman we're calling Maya to some horrific sexual abuse. He's been questioned further this morning, and he has got remarkably angry.
He has. Amusingly, he's got remarkably angry, but he has also added a new tick to his evidence giving, which is that when he superciliously and rudely corrects CTI, he says, "I don't mean any disrespect," which I suspect means that he's either watched your videos of people talking about how rude and disrespectful he has been, or somebody has given him a tap on the shoulder overnight, which hasn't stopped him being rude, but it has led to him kind of pointing out that he has been rude after he does. I mean, I was struck by that. We've had a lot. We're kind of going through the end days of his deployment. There's quite a lot of significant stuff happened in the end days of his deployment. My understanding is that Rob Hastings was actually kind of responsible for the death knell of he was the final nail in the coffin. He got arrested.
Yes.
Was, as far as I can tell, kind of, with all the other defendants, with the representatives, in the style of the SDS, going back
just
decades.
Classic SDS, really.
But there were new people who had been brought in, and it was no longer the dumb thing.
No, I mean, essentially, it always been it's always been remarkably illegal to lie to courts. Been remarkably illegal to report professional legal privilege, legal professional privilege. And he sees no issue with any of it. He's like, I was told to maintain cover. I was told to report whatever I want, whatever I came across. So we see his reports, which are literally reproductions of what the legal advice had been, letters from solicitors, all this stuff, all what we've come used to seeing SDS officers do. He lies to the court. He gives a plea in. He pretends to still be Harrison. But now, for the first time, it appears it's an issue.
There is somebody in management who goes, "You fucking what?" And this is what leads to the actual closure of the SDS, is my understanding.
Yes, very much.
The people who have been called in by this point to audit the SDS,
SO15,
are all going through everything, from the reporting to the authorization process to the accounting and the expenses process, going, what the actual fuck? So this is, the final nail in a coffin that was already well and truly hammered, I think.
Yes, absolutely. We saw a little sort of like taster of this when with Simon Wellings's evidence, where we saw this letter that was kind of like, where he'd lied to the court, and it was like, do we need to, we've got a once only option here of basically we're going to shut down the unit, and it's like, oh no, that's staved off, and it's just a little bit later when it's Hastings that's responsible in the end.
Yes. And so we've seen a bunch of stuff, his reporting from events surrounding that, and also, one of the things he said that I thought was interesting, he was asked about Emily Apple and his reporting on Emily Apple. He actually said that one of the other UCOs was specifically targeted against Emily
HN3, Jason Bishop.
HN3, Jason Bishop. I don't think that was apparent in Jason Bishop's evidence.
I mean, I think it was apparent to Emily Apple.
It was apparent to everybody. But it wasn't, there was, he kind of says, well, we were friends, maybe we were friends. He never says my targeting was to get close to Emily Apple.
Yeah.
Which I think is interesting. I mean, it obviously was.
Very.
Then we saw, I mean, just now, just before coming out, there was this issue around the cancellation. So when they shut down these operations, there's a bit of a kind of review of the deployment, and in the final review of Hastings' deployment, one of the things it says is that he has provided reporting on the Jean-Charles de Menezes campaign and any threats that might pose to MPS staff.
And he was offended. I'm offended. That's offended. That's offensive. I'm offended. Offense. He's such a delicate snowflake.
He
really can't handle it. I mean, facts don't care about feelings, Rob. God.
So but he wasn't offended that his managers had written that in the document. He was offended that he was being asked about it.
Yes.
And
I mean, he was so this final document, this like 3-month review of the last quarter of his deployment. He's asked him very, very pedestrian questions. Do you dispute that this is true? Is it exaggerated or is it entirely false? And he just gets really angry. He's like, I did not write this report, and I think it's clear to see that if you reviewed all the documents, you've been released all the documents of my reporting, and if you went through all of them, you'd be able to see that I've got clear issues with what's in the accuracy of this final report. It's like, just say you think it's untrue or you think it's exaggerated, whatever it is. You don't need to have a little hissy fit every time. Fucking weirdo.
There was a lot of very defensive anger coming out in this last section. One of the things that he was asked was about the disintegration of the state of emergency group. And in this closing report, it describes how he spied on the state of emergency group, which was initially thought that it might replace the Wombles in the kind of political landscape of London, but that group has now also disintegrated due to, and the wording was something like, the usual interpersonal issues. Now, we know that there was a significant interpersonal issue which led to the collapse of the state of emergency group, which was that Rob Harrison, one of the members of the group, was accused of groping a woman at a party. And there was supposed to be a process to ask him about this and deal with this, and he didn't show up. And there is an email from him about that. So, and CTI said, well, did you have anything to do with the interpersonal issues that led to the breakdown of that group? I wasn't really clear about his answer.
His wording was that if I was directed to sow discord in order to dissolve an activist group, then I would have done that.
Yes, that was it. And I was kind of left like, so
which is
what?
I mean, that's a hell of an admission.
It is a hell of an admission.
I mean, it's something we have said that these officers were doing for a very long time. I think he's the first officer to actually admit to it.
Yes, and I think what's particularly significant about this is the way that discord was sown was through sexual assault.
Yes. I mean, it's his speciality.
But this is not. I mean, maybe that was his own creative take on how to sow discord in the group, but I'm not sure, because it's not the. I mean, I've also seen other evidence now from people involved in the Rampart that he was involved in trying to split up the couple who were the people living at the Rampart and running that space. There's a definite, and I mean, your own experiences, I think, chime with this in some way, that there is a definite sense that when these officers wanted to disrupt groups, using sex and relationships as a way to do that was like quite an effective, particularly sexual assault. I mean, I've having been in groups where there have been issues around sexual assault and how that is dealt with, it is an incredibly destructive thing.
Yes.
Yes, I'm hoping that there will be more questions of him about the demise of state of emergency, and indeed about his extremely inappropriate sexual behaviour more generally, and postings on Urban 75 that are all there. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a huge area, right? And I think it's something that's going to come to the fore even more in tranche 4 when we look at the MPORU officers, because I think you're absolutely right. I think the use of sexual abuse, sexual assault, and splitting up of relationships was something that they engineered themselves, and in
order to undermine political campaigns.
Exactly, and dissolve groups. I mean, he used the word dissolve activist groups, and I think that's the effect it had on state of emergency.
It is the effect it had on state of emergency.
Yeah, very much. I mean, I think like it was only a small part of his questioning, but I think it's huge significance.
Yes, no, it was one of those things where, like, quite a few
people put their knitting down.
Yeah. I just want to say, in other news, I have now finished my tranche 3 jumper, so I'm out of knitting.
Thank God for that. That's the main thing. I mean, it was remarked to me by Alison that I had appeared to have be doing some typing in the middle of a craft workshop in the public gallery. Just some of the other things that he was asked about. just going back to the stuff about his arrest at Dicey, because of the fall of that, from that, he has a debrief meeting with 2 officers, which, unbeknownst to him, the transcript is being prepared for the CPS.
Yes.
He is remarkably angry during this, and he even admits that he was very angry during it. And it's within it, he says that it was a successful operation, that him getting arrested with these 20 activists was a successful operation because it meant that those activists were not available because of the bail conditions that were
this
put on.
is what we heard already before
Yes.
about this use of police bail conditions as a way of disrupting people's ability to politically protest, which again is hugely inappropriate. And yet there is just no critical thinking at all on the part of Harrison about this. This is absolutely what the police are supposed to be for, as far as he's concerned.
Yeah, it's put to him, is this the attitude of the SDS? And he said, well, I think it was the attitude of SDS to prevent any sort of criminal damage or was the potential things that potentially could be considered criminal from happening. He says, and it was certainly, so would the SDS consider it a successful operation? He said, well, I consider it a successful operation.
I mean, and this is, I mean, what we're talking about here is essentially preventative arrest and punishment for something that the police think you might want to do. You know, these are issues that very rarely go to court. And that was another thing that it seemed that CTI had really picked up on, is this issue.
CTI is counsel for the inquiry. It's the barrister who asks the questions.
Is this issue of miscarriages of justice and the fact that a lot of these actions that Harrison particularly was spying on, the aim of the action was in fact for people to be arrested in order to go to court and be able to raise the issues, the legal questions about the things that they were protesting about in court. So some of the actions against Carmela Grexico, for example, but also the state of emergency demonstration. And so the fact that, you know, sinister police involvement behind the scenes in this process means that the police are going to the CPS and saying, we want you to drop these charges, actually prevents that legal and political process of laws and behavior by people in power being challenged through that day in court. And there were some questions asked about that, and there was a sense I got, I think, that the inquiry has recognised that as another possible issue.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think this is a big area because it's there's a sense that, like, oh well, nobody was convicted, so no harm, no foul, and it's like bullshit. Absolute bullshit. I mean, not least the fact that, you know, people are arrested, they go through a whole like experience of arrest.
They're bailed to prevent them from protesting, and then the charges are dropped afterwards. I mean, there's huge questions here around the nature of political policing. I think it's very striking that Harrison, HN18, Hastings, whatever his fucking name is, is repeatedly saying they were an activist.
Yes.
They were an activist.
That's
they were an
justification.
activist. That justifies it. And that mentality, you know, and council has been very good in referring to people as members of the public rather than as activists, because this notion, I mean, this was something that came up in the IPT as well when they when I first received the disclosure, all the names had been redacted, not as privacy in the way that they are here, but as activist. You know, and that included the local vicar, it included serving MPs, like everybody was redacted as activist, and we objected to that immediately on the grounds that it basically prejudiced anybody reading the document, because there is this, and there obviously is this idea in the police that anybody who is engaged in political activism of any sort, and there was also this reference today to negative reporting and the fact that, you know, it is equally valuable, and this is literally word for word what it said in the report, it is equally valuable to the police to receive reporting on a group's intention not to do something or not to take part in a protest, because that it's all information about, you know, people's political activities. What that basically means is whatever your group is doing, even if you're not, and this came out in the reviews of Mark Kennedy's operation as well in 2012-2014, that they were reporting on absolutely everybody because negative reporting saying this group is not going to be involved in direct action, or this group is not going to be involved in public disorder, is considered equally valuable by the police. Basically, anybody involved in politics is considered fair game.
And it's this idea that an activist might as well equal criminal, because because political activism is considered a form of criminality. Entirely.
I mean, we come later to the National Public Order Intelligence Unit authorizations, where they say things like anybody coming into contact with this undercover officer is by definition a target of the operation, because the circles in which they move in function like that, essentially. And that was the other thing that we had this afternoon, was going through a lot of the Reaper authorizations. And this is...
I've never seen this. You've signed it. Yeah. Well, just because I signed it doesn't mean I understood it. Would you have not understood it at the time? Well, I hope I would have.
Yes,
I mean, just this ridiculous...
It's this kind of not wanting to look like a total twat.
Failing.
But at the same time, not wanting to admit to having had any awareness or knowledge or understanding of anything. He absolutely... He's persisting in his, insistence that he will not discuss anything unless they have a document that speaks to it. And, counsel has repeatedly said, well, from your own recollection, that he won't say anything from his own recollection unless there is a document.
Unless it's something that he's definitely didn't do.
Yes.
So, for example, it was right at the start of the day, but there was a report of his where it talked about Rob, surname unknown, is a driver. Rob, surname unknown, locks on. He goes, well, I definitely didn't lock on. What do you remember from the event? I don't remember anything, but I remember I didn't lock on.
Yes. And we know that he did.
Yes.
We've contacted people who were involved in that event. He did lock on. We're assuming that his flat out denial that he would have locked on comes from the fact that he would not have been authorized to do that.
Yes. I mean, there was a couple of times he said, I remember this. I do recall this. And then it's like, so what? So, for example, the workshop on the No Borders workshop at the climate camp in Heathrow, he's like, I remember this. I do recall this. And so what was covered, I don't recall.
Yeah.
And it's just like, you just said you recalled it, and then you've just immediately just gone, hang on a minute, I shouldn't
admit to remembering anything.
Yeah.
We talked about this yesterday. He also does have surprisingly clear recollection of a number of political issues, including things that happened long before he was deployed.
Yeah, very long before.
That he considers provide justification
for
what he was doing. Oh, there was another bit of questioning when we were looking at the report, the closing report, the cancellation of his deployment, which was around the list of his close associates.
Yes.
The list of his close associates is topped by two names of individuals, one of whom I believe was a suicide bomber, died in a suicide bombing attack in Tel Aviv. The other is believed to be an accomplice and was found dead a couple of weeks later on the beach.
18 months before he was deployed.
Yes, both of these individuals were dead before he was deployed. Yet
before he was recruited to the SDS.
Yeah. Yet somehow these are described as his close associates, which either raises significant questions about what he was doing before he joined the SDS, or is just complete bollocks. Then the next name on the list is Atif Chowdhury, who is the only other Asian Muslim person on the list. Hastings was asked repeatedly whether he considered that to be an example of racial profiling, institutional racism. Again, he just refused to answer the question and stropped a lot about the fact he was being asked.
He claimed that institutional racism is far too simplistic a term. It doesn't explain what's going on.
Yes,
he doesn't accept it.
Supercilious gammon sitting in the witness box lecturing the inquiry and the public at large about institutional racism is one of the most irritating things about this witness, I have to say.
I mean, what I thought was particularly interesting was only a few moments later when he was asked about the detection of terrorism that he had managed to do, given that his original authorization was about supposedly finding early detection of support for terrorism, that he referred to this document that he found in someone's papers that had the names of these two people on it, it was unclear what it was from particularly. It was a very old piece of paper which he had submitted, and he said, well, apart from that, that was a sign that I'd found some terrorism, and that he had been annoyed those two names had been his associates, yet also submitting those two names from an old piece of paper that
was like the only thing he ever did that
yeah.
could potentially justify. I mean, his authorizations say that he was deployed into ISM because of potential links to Islamic extremism and terrorism. I don't think we can stress enough, because this is something that really starts to come up now. These Reaper authorities, these reviews are what make or break the question about whether these deployments were lawful. So the fact that they are from the very beginning, and this carries on, and I've seen them going right up to the MPOIU, they're based on lies.
Yes.
They are well aware, when they're writing these authorities, that what they are doing is not lawful under the Human Rights Act, but if it's properly authorized, it becomes lawful. And so they lie because they can't justify it. They can't make it seem proportional to what they're actually doing. So, and I remember this from going through the IPT documents, the authorizations are boring. They are repetitive, they are boring, but they are incredibly important, because when it comes to it, from 2000, when the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act comes into effect, if they're not doing this authorization process right, it's all unlawful. And that's what we're seeing. And the fact that Harrison is sitting there saying, I never saw these, I didn't know anything about these, I don't know what you're talking about, doesn't absolve him. Because actually, him knowing about it was a lawful requirement. The fact that he signs it suggests that he actually did know about it. But him knowing about it is problematic, because what it says is, on his own evidence, obviously wrong. So he's trying to claim, I didn't know anything about this, I didn't have anything to do with writing this. Either way, both Hastings and the Metropolitan Police are a bit fucked with this.
Yes.
That, like, when it comes down to it. And, I think this is probably also going to extend into the deployments that are being heard about enclosed. And it's one of the things that I'll be making submissions to the inquiry about, is it doesn't actually matter what they were doing, or who they were spying on, or whether or not we've had the contrasting evidence to it. If the Reaper authorities are bullshit, then this is an unauthorized violation of people's human rights, and even the far right have human rights not to have the police, going into their houses and sleeping with them. And and I mean, whenever we talk about this, I always need to remind people that it's not just that we're like, we're worrying about the human rights of fascists, but also the amount of things that we know that the undercover officers in our movement allowed to let happen so they could report on them. I think the stakes are very different when they're infiltrating fascist, racist groups, where they're allowing things to happen within those groups and taking part in them. I mean, yes, I do question, but also I think it extends beyond that, because what we're not seeing, we've seen glimpses of here with the racial profiling surrounding Rob Hastings' deployment. But of course, what we're not seeing is all the deployments that weren't focusing on left-wing politics. They were focusing on Muslim communities. And we know that Hastings went on to work with the Muslim Contact Unit. We know that a lot of the STS officers went on to work with the Muslim Contact Unit. And the point is that this playing fast and loose with people's human rights and with the law is the established MO of the STS. It becomes the established MO of the MPOIU. And at that point, I think it's really important to say that, when we're talking about people's Article 3 rights to, not to be subjected to inhuman and degrading treatment, it doesn't matter if they're terrorists. The law is the law, and these people are the cops, and that's their job. So it's not about me defending the rights of the far right. It's about the fact that if the police, for any reason, are allowed to think that they are above the law, this is what happens, and what we're seeing here is what happens. I mention the far right because we don't know what is happening enclosed, but there have been nudges and winks to the effect that some of what is behind those redactions and some of what is in that closed material relates to spying on what were probably very nasty, racist, violent groups. But actually that doesn't make it okay if you're lying in your reporting and you're abusing the rights of the people that you're spying on, and your operation is not properly authorized and is effectively unlawful. So I think, and I'm very concerned that Mitting is taking a remarkably uncritical approach to the evidence that has been heard and closed and that has not been challenged.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is also fuck fascism, but it is incredibly incredibly troubling, and it suggests that he is possibly naive in his approach in that particular area.
I mean, I honestly don't see how you could be. Just that every single possible justification that has come up in relation to us has been countered by witness after witness and evidence from it turns out we were all hoarders. So there's paper evidence, there's photographs from the time. All of this stuff is challenged. These cops are shown to be liars. I don't see how you could then just say, oh, but these guys were spying on the far right, so we can just take all of this at face value. It shows an admirable level of anti-fascism on the part of Sir John Mitting, but I don't think it's.
I don't think it's helpful.
I don't think it's helpful.
No. We're on our lunch break. We'd like to go and have our lunch. I think we have got one afternoon left of Robert Hastings. That will be the last of the field officers from the SDS. Tune in if you're able to. There'll be a fresh link to the one that we're reacting to that's in the description. I'll share it before the hearings start. Tune in if you can. It will cover when he re-enters into Maya's life before the start of the inquiry. After the inquiry's been announced, that will be harrowing and unpleasant. I'd recommend some sort of caution before listening to that. It will be very unpleasant. There'll also be a section that will be enclosed. There will be some Rule 10 questions. I don't know how many of them will end up happening. We will hopefully be finished at some point today, though I get the impression it might run late.
I feel like it's going to run late. I hope it runs late because there's a lot of stuff that I feel hasn't been asked yet.
There's an enormous amount that hasn't been asked, hasn't really been touched on. There's just one comment. Wouldn't be surprised if members of the far right groups were recruited to the SDS to join the real fascists. I mean, who knows who they met from work whilst they were deployed undercover. All right, thanks for joining us. I'll see you all again this afternoon. We'll be doing a video during the break and then one at the end of the day.